Right now, at this exact moment, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group is conducting damage assessment operations in international waters approximately 180 nautical miles northeast of Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The Pentagon issued a statement 40 minutes ago stating the carrier sustained no mission-affecting damage and continues normal operations. Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen claim they successfully struck the 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with a coordinated drone swarm attack involving 12 unmanned aerial vehicles launched simultaneously from 3 separate locations along Yemen's western coastline. One of these 2 statements is a deliberate lie crafted for strategic messaging purposes, and the next 72 hours will reveal which military force is manipulating information during what has become the most significant direct threat to an American aircraft carrier since World War II. The implications extend far beyond battle damage reports and competing press releases. If Houthi forces actually achieve penetration of the carrier strike group's defensive perimeter, a multi-layered shield of radar systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and kinetic interceptors representing the most sophisticated naval air defense architecture ever deployed, then fundamental assumptions about naval power projection in contested maritime environments require immediate revision. If the Pentagon's categorical denial proves accurate, then Iran's proxy force just committed strategic messaging suicide, destroying their own deterrent credibility with a fabricated claim that satellite imagery and independent verification will definitively disprove within hours. Let me walk you through exactly what happened based on verified reporting from multiple independent sources and military tracking systems. At 0342 hours local time on March 9, 2026, maritime surveillance radars operated by commercial shipping tracking firms detected unusual aerial activity originating from 3 separate points along Yemen's Red Sea coast. Coordinates 15. 4 degrees north, 42. 8 degrees east near Al-Hudaydah port. Coordinates 14. 2 degrees north, 43. 0 degrees east near Mocha and coordinates 13. 3 degrees north, 43. 1 degree east near Bab el-Mandeb. According to initial reports filed with the International Maritime Organization, multiple merchant vessels transiting the southern Red Sea received urgent maritime safety broadcast from the 5th Fleet's Maritime Operations Center warning of imminent hostile drone activity in the region. At 0356 hours local time, the destroyer USS Gravely, operating as forward air defense picket approximately 60 nautical miles southwest of the Eisenhower's position, reportedly activated its /spy 6V1 air and missile defense radar system, which detected multiple inbound contacts classified as small unmanned aerial systems approaching from the Yemeni coast at varying altitudes between 500 and 2,000 feet above sea level. The Gravely's tactical action officer initiated defensive protocols, according to sources familiar with the engagement timeline, who spoke on condition of anonymity because operational details remain classified. At 0401 hours, the Eisenhower's own defensive systems, including the ship's N/SBS 48 E three-dimensional air search radar and N/SBS 49 V 8 two-dimensional long-range air surveillance radar, acquired tracking data on what the Combat Information Center initially assessed as 9 to 12 distinct airborne contacts. The carrier's close-in weapons systems, specifically the ship's 3 phalanx CIWS installations and 2 RIM 116 rolling airframe missile launchers, transitioned from standby mode to active defensive posture. Ship-wide general quarters was sounded, bringing the Eisenhower's crew of approximately 5,000 personnel to battle stations within the Navy's standard response timeline of under 3 minutes. Between 0403 and 0409 hours, multiple engagements occurred in the airspace surrounding the carrier strike group. The USS Gravely reportedly fired a minimum of 4 RIM 162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, each costing approximately $1.8 million at contacts deemed highest priority based on trajectory analysis indicating potential strike vectors toward the carrier. The destroyer USS Laboon, positioned northeast of the Eisenhower, engaged additional contacts with its phalanx systems, expending an estimated 600 to 800 rounds of 20 mm depleted uranium penetrator ammunition. The Eisenhower itself reportedly engaged 3 separate contacts that penetrated the outer defensive perimeter, with the carrier's own rolling airframe missile systems achieving at least 2 confirmed intercepts based on fragmentary radar return patterns consistent with successful target destruction. At 0411 hours, approximately 29 minutes after initial radar detection, the Eisenhower's Combat Information Center reported to Fifth Fleet Headquarters that all tracked airborne threats had been either destroyed or had crashed into the sea without achieving impact on any vessels in the carrier strike group. Damage control teams conducted immediate inspection of the flight deck, island superstructure, and critical system spaces. At 0437 hours, the carrier resumed fixed-wing flight operations, with an F divided by a -18E Super Hornet launching from Catapult 3 in what Navy sources characterized as a demonstration of operational readiness following the engagement. At 0524 hours, approximately 1 hour and 42 minutes after the engagement concluded, Houthi military spokesperson Brigadier General Yahya Sari appeared in a recorded video statement broadcast on Houthi-controlled Al-Masirah television. Sari claimed that naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces carried out a qualitative military operation targeting the American aircraft carrier Eisenhower in the Red Sea with a number of ballistic missiles and drones. He specifically stated that the operation achieved direct hits on the aircraft carrier and warned that American military presence in the Red Sea and Arabian Sea will face escalating operations until the aggression against Gaza stops and the siege is lifted. At 0603 hours, U.S. Central Command posted on the social media platform X, formerly Twitter. Reports that the USS Eisenhower was struck by Houthi drones are categorically false. The Eisenhower successfully defended against a multi-axis drone attack. All attacking UAVs were destroyed. The carrier sustained no damage and continues combat operations. Claims to the contrary are misinformation. The statement included no visual evidence, no imagery, and no additional operational details beyond the categorical denial. Here's what you need to understand about the drone systems potentially involved in this attack. The Houthi forces in Yemen have demonstrated increasing sophistication in unmanned aerial vehicle operations over the past 18 months, operating Iranian-supplied systems alongside indigenously modified designs. The primary long-range strike drone in their inventory is the Samad-3, a medium-altitude reconnaissance and strike platform with an operational range estimated at 1,500 kilometers and a warhead capacity of approximately 18 kilograms of high explosive. This is not a consumer quadcopter purchased from a commercial retailer. This is a purpose-built military drone comparable in design to Iran's Shahed 136 kamikaze drone that Russian forces have employed extensively against Ukrainian infrastructure targets. The Samad-3 uses a relatively simple flight control system combining GPS waypoint navigation with possible terminal guidance through either infrared seeking or electro-optical targeting. The drone achieves speeds of approximately 140 to 160 knots during cruise flight, making it subsonic but challenging to intercept through kinetic means given its relatively small radar cross-section. The airframe construction uses fiberglass composites that minimize electromagnetic signature, though the propulsion system, typically a small reciprocating engine similar to those found in ultralight aircraft, generates acoustic and infrared signatures that modern naval sensors can detect at ranges of 20 to 30 kilometers under favorable atmospheric conditions. The Houthi inventory also includes the Kasef-2K, a smaller tactical drone with approximately 150-kilometer range and carrying a warhead of roughly 8 to 10 kilograms. These systems represent crude but effective weapons when employed in saturation attacks designed to overwhelm defensive systems through simultaneous engagement of multiple targets arriving from different vectors. The economic asymmetry is startling. Each Kasef-2K costs perhaps $20,000 to manufacture, while each Evolved Sea Sparrow missile fired in defense costs $1. $8 million. A dozen drones costing $240,000 total can force expenditure of $7. $2 million in interceptor missiles, creating favorable exchange ratios for the attacking force even when all drones are destroyed before reaching their target. Now let's discuss the defensive architecture those drones faced. The USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group operates a layered integrated air defense system representing approximately $12 billion in combined platform and sensor investment. The outermost layer consists of F/A 18 Super Hornets operating combat air patrol missions at ranges of 150 to 200 nautical miles from the carrier, providing airborne early warning and potential interception capability against inbound threats detected by the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Airborne Early Warning Aircraft. These fighters can employ AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles with 100-kilometer engagement range against airborne targets, though employing multi-million-dollar air-to-air missiles against $20,000 drones represents economically inefficient resource allocation. The middle defensive layer consists of the strike group's Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers equipped with the Aegis combat system. The /Spy 6V1 radar installed on Flight 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers like the USS Gravely can detect, track, and engage hundreds of targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 300 kilometers for conventional aircraft and approximately 80 to 120 kilometers for small drones, depending on altitude and atmospheric conditions. These ships carry a mixed magazine of SM-2, SM-6, and evolved Sea Sparrow missiles providing engagement options at various ranges. The SM-6, representing the most capable interceptor in the inventory, costs approximately $4.3 million per round and offers engagement ranges exceeding 240 kilometers, though it's designed for high-value threats like anti-ship cruise missiles and ballistic missiles rather than small drones. The inner defensive layer belongs to the carrier itself and consists of the RIM-116 rolling airframe missile and the Phalanx close-in weapon system. The RIM-116 operates as a fire-and-forget infrared-guided missile that locks onto the heat signature of approaching threats within approximately 9 kilometers of the ship. Each 21-round launcher can engage multiple threats in rapid succession, with reload capability if the engagement extends beyond initial magazine capacity. The system's reaction time from threat detection to missile launch is under 5 seconds, making it effective against maneuvering targets in the terminal phase of their attack profile. The Phalanx CIWS represents the absolute last line of defense, a radar-guided 20mm Gatling gun system capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute at targets within 5 kilometers of the ship. The system operates autonomously, with onboard tracking radars controlling gun elevation and azimuth to create a defensive cone of fire that theoretically shreds inbound targets before they can impact the ship. The effectiveness of Phalanx against small drones remains somewhat uncertain because the system was designed for larger, faster anti-ship missiles rather than relatively slow-moving small unmanned aircraft. The radar cross-section of a small drone may fall below optimal tracking parameters, and the kinetic energy transfer from 20mm projectiles may prove insufficient to destroy fiberglass composite airframes that lack the large fuel tanks and explosive warheads characteristic of traditional anti-ship missiles. This brings us to the central strategic question: can drones actually threaten a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier? The answer is more complicated than simple yes or no. A single small drone carrying 10 to 18 kilograms of high explosive cannot sink or mission kill a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with 5-acre flight deck and heavily compartmentalized internal structure. The armored flight deck can withstand significant blast effects, and the ship's damage control systems, including redundant firefighting capabilities and extensive compartmentation, mean that even successful drone strikes would likely cause localized damage rather than catastrophic system failure. However, mission disruption represents a different calculation than mission kill. If even one drone successfully penetrates defensive systems and detonates on the flight deck during active flight operations, the explosion could damage or destroy parked aircraft worth $70 million each, kill or injure flight deck personnel whose training represents years of institutional investment, and force temporary suspension of flight operations while damage assessment and clearing operations occur. A carrier that cannot launch and recover aircraft has lost its primary military function even if the ship itself remains seaworthy. In this context, even unsuccessful attacks that force defensive expenditure and operational disruption achieve strategic effects by imposing costs on carrier operations and demonstrating that American naval power projection faces meaningful opposition even from non-state actors with relatively unsophisticated military capabilities. The strategic context surrounding this incident extends far beyond tactical details of drone performance and defensive system effectiveness. This engagement occurred within a broader operational environment where Iranian-backed forces across the Middle East have escalated attacks against American military positions and commercial interests in response to American support for Israeli military operations in Gaza. Houthi forces in Yemen have conducted approximately 60 separate attacks against commercial shipping in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden since November 2023, forcing major shipping companies to reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope at enormous additional cost and extending global supply chain transit times by 2 to 3 weeks. The targeting of the Eisenhower represents qualitative escalation beyond previous Houthi operations, which primarily focused on merchant vessels and occasionally struck commercial tankers and container ships. Directly attacking an American aircraft carrier crosses a threshold that carries significantly different strategic implications than interfering with international commercial shipping. From the American perspective, accepting that Houthi forces can attack capital ships of the United States Navy without massive retaliation would represent unacceptable erosion of deterrence that could encourage further attacks not only from Houthis but from other Iranian proxy forces, including Hezbollah and Lebanon, various Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria, and potentially from Iran itself. From the Houthi perspective, which reflects Iranian strategic direction, given that Yemen's Ansar Allah movement receives weapons, training, intelligence support, and operational guidance from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, attacking the carrier serves multiple purposes. First, it generates propaganda value demonstrating that even a relatively unsophisticated non-state actor can threaten American military power, potentially deterring future American military intervention in regional conflicts. Second, it signals to domestic Yemeni audiences and to the broader Arab and Muslim world that Houthi forces are actively confronting Western military power on behalf of Palestinians in Gaza, bolstering the movement's claims to regional resistance leadership. Third, it forces American resource expenditure and operational tempo strain as carrier strike groups maintain heightened defensive postures, conducting continuous air patrols and maintaining weapons systems at immediate readiness states that accelerate maintenance requirements and personnel fatigue. According to Dr. Bilal Saab, Senior Fellow and Director of the Defense and Security Program at the Middle East Institute in Washington, the Houthis have demonstrated surprising operational creativity in their Red Sea campaign. But directly targeting an American carrier represents a major escalation with potentially severe consequences. If the attack succeeded in causing damage, the Biden administration would face overwhelming pressure to conduct large-scale retaliatory strikes. If the attack failed completely, as Pentagon claims suggest, the Houthis have undermined their own deterrent credibility by making claims that can be independently verified as false. Either way, this represents a high-risk gambit for a movement that has carefully calibrated its attacks to inflict costs without triggering massive American retaliation. The information warfare dimension of this incident deserves particular attention. Both sides have strong incentives to shape public perception of what occurred regardless of objective facts. The Houthis benefit from claiming success even without achieving actual damage because the claim itself demonstrates boldness and supports narrative of effective resistance against American military dominance. The social media environment enables rapid dissemination of these claims before verification can occur, and correction of false claims rarely achieves the same reach as initial sensational reporting. For many audiences predisposed to support resistance against American military presence in the region, the claim of hitting the carrier becomes accepted fact regardless of subsequent contradictory evidence. The American military faces its own messaging challenges. Admitting that Houthi drones successfully struck the carrier would require explaining how this occurred despite multi-billion-dollar defensive systems, potentially undermining confidence in naval air defense capabilities and encouraging further attacks. However, issuing categorical denials that later prove false would cause even greater credibility damage. The Pentagon statement carefully claims no damage rather than claiming no impacts occurred, leaving potential semantic space for admitting that drones reached the carrier without causing mission-affecting damage. The absence of visual evidence supporting either claim leaves the information environment contested, with verification potentially coming from commercial satellite imagery providers who can image the Eisenhower and assess visible damage in coming days. This incident also occurs against backdrop of broader American naval strategic dilemmas in the Middle East. The United States maintains persistent aircraft carrier presence in Central Command's area of responsibility specifically to deter Iranian aggression and provide rapid strike capability against emerging threats. However, that persistent presence also creates persistent vulnerability as carriers operate in relatively constrained maritime geography where adversaries can employ shore-based sensors to track ship movements and potentially coordinate attacks. The Red Sea and Gulf of Aden represent particularly challenging operational environments with numerous potential adversary observation points along lengthy coastlines and limited sea room for defensive maneuvering. The economic warfare dimension cannot be ignored. Every attack or threat of attack against commercial shipping in the Red Sea imposes costs on global commerce far exceeding the direct military costs of defensive operations. Insurance rates for vessels transiting the region have increased by 300 to 400% since Houthi attacks began, and many shipping companies have entirely ceased Red Sea transits despite significantly longer alternative routes. Egypt loses an estimated $500 million monthly in Suez Canal fees as shipping volumes decline. These economic effects achieve Iranian strategic objectives of imposing costs on Western economies and demonstrating that Middle Eastern instability affects global commercial interests, potentially generating pressure for policy changes from business interests affected by disrupted trade routes. Let me show you the three primary scenarios for how this situation develops over the next 72 to 96 hours, with probability assessments based on historical precedent and strategic incentives facing each actor. Scenario 1. Limited American retaliation with increased defensive posture, probability 45%. In this trajectory, the Biden administration conducts targeted strikes against 10 to 15 Houthi drone launch sites, weapons storage facilities, and radar installations along Yemen's western coast. These strikes employ Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from destroyers and submarines in the region, possibly supplemented by B-1B bomber strikes using joint direct attack munitions against hardened targets. The stated objective emphasizes degrading Houthi capability to conduct future attacks rather than pursuing regime change or comprehensive destruction of Houthi military infrastructure. The Eisenhower Strike Group repositions further south in the Gulf of Aden, increasing standoff distance from Yemeni coast while maintaining regional presence. Houthi forces conduct symbolic retaliatory attacks against targets in Saudi Arabia or against commercial vessels, claiming victory through survival of American strikes. Iran signals through diplomatic channels that it does not seek wider escalation while maintaining plausible deniability regarding control over Houthi operations. This scenario represents path of least escalation while allowing both sides to claim they've achieved objectives and maintain deterrence. The strategic logic supporting this scenario emphasizes that both the United States and Iran possess strong incentives to avoid wider regional war despite tactical confrontations. The Biden administration faces domestic political pressure to respond to attacks on American forces but lacks appetite for major Middle East military commitment during an election year and while managing Ukraine support and potential China-Taiwan contingencies. Iran benefits from low-intensity conflict that imposes costs on American forces and generates propaganda value without risking catastrophic retaliation against Iranian territory that would threaten regime survival. The Houthis can sustain tactical losses from American strikes while maintaining strategic narrative of resistance, particularly if civilian casualties occur that can be leveraged for propaganda purposes. Scenario 2. Escalatory spiral through miscalculation or accident, probability 35%. In this more dangerous trajectory, American retaliatory strikes cause significant Houthi casualties, including potential civilian deaths if intelligence targeting proves imperfect. Houthi forces, facing domestic pressure to demonstrate resolve and operating under operational guidance from IRGC advisors. Conduct follow-up attacks employing longer-range weapons, potentially including anti-ship ballistic missiles targeting American vessels or American facilities in neighboring countries. One of these follow-up attacks succeeds in causing American casualties, perhaps striking a destroyer on picket duty or hitting American personnel at a base in Djibouti where the United States maintains significant military presence. The Biden administration now faces politically untenable position of absorbed American casualties without comprehensive response. Escalation accelerates as the United States conducts large-scale air campaign against Houthi infrastructure while Iran activates proxy forces in Iraq and Syria to strike American bases, opening multiple fronts simultaneously. Israel potentially conducts parallel strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon or Iranian facilities in Syria, creating regional crisis with potential for direct U.S.-Iran military confrontation. The strategic logic of this scenario emphasizes the risk of action-reaction cycles where neither side intends major war, but tactical responses and domestic political pressures drive escalation beyond actors' initial intentions. Historical examples include the 1967 Six-Day War, where escalatory dynamics overwhelmed diplomatic efforts, and numerous Cold War crises, where brinkmanship nearly produced unintended nuclear exchange. In contemporary context, the combination of multiple proxy forces operating with varying degrees of central control, real-time social media pressure for immediate responses, and compressed decision timelines for missile defense creates conditions where miscalculation or accident can trigger escalation spirals that leaders struggle to control. Scenario 3. Diplomatic de-escalation through back-channel negotiations. Probability 20%. In this optimistic scenario, the current incident serves as wake-up call prompting renewed diplomatic engagement. The United States and Iran communicate through Swiss intermediaries who have historically facilitated back-channel dialogue, with both sides recognizing that continued escalation serves neither party's interests. Iran agrees to instruct Houthi forces to cease attacks on American military vessels, while maintaining politically acceptable position that attacks on commercial shipping supporting Israel may continue at reduced intensity. The United States agrees to refrain from large-scale strikes on Houthi infrastructure while reserving right to conduct limited self-defense operations if American forces are directly threatened. Both sides leverage the incident to demonstrate resolve to domestic audiences while quietly agreeing to de-escalate through actions rather than formal agreements that would require politically difficult public acknowledgments. The Gaza conflict potentially reaches ceasefire agreement that removes underlying driver of Houthi operations, creating conditions for broader regional de-escalation.